Welcome back to West Texas View.
We've been talking this past segment about boomers and senior citizens and the suicide rate that has increased so much in recent years. And Dr. Jain was saying that one of the things that makes it something that we need to watch, those people around us that we love, for verbal cues. Watch for things that trigger frustration in them, and so this is good. This is part of our education that we're getting from you as to what we need to watch for. But you did a program 2 years ago, I guess, for me, and talked about child suicide. And I have to repeat this story because it's so amazing to me. But you told some of the signs that you should watch for in depression of a very small child, as young as 2 or 3 years old, could be depressed and commit suicide. And shortly after that, I had a grandmother to call and say she had watched the program, and when she heard what you said about depression in children, that everything clicked, and they had been taking their little grandchild to a physical exams, and then they immediately took them for mental health exams.
My time well served. Even if I'm able to touch one life, one child's life, I'm able to touch so many different lives through
and
that
she
child.
said you saved her child's life.
Oh, glad. I'm so
with
happy.
that, and that was the thing that I thought was so interesting.
That's really
but
a blessing.
I'd like to go a little bit more back to something that we talked about last Sunday, and that's psychiatry and telemedicine, because it's hard for me to exactly understand how that works. I understand Skype, I know that we're talking, but how do you develop that patient doctor relationship on a TV screen?
Yeah, this is a new technology, and it's kind of we're still experimenting it. As the resolution of the pictures and the quality of the pictures are so getting better and better with the new technology, and the sound quality, it almost feels like, it cannot be physical touch, it cannot replace face to face, but having a life size picture of you interacting screen and talking to each other, it's a very realistic way of doing it. Of course, it cannot replace face to face. So basically what really works, and that brings a bigger topic of how much it is important to have a rapport with the patient. How much is in psychiatry, how much is important. We know it's extremely important when you go into counseling to have some form of rapport with the counselor and the patient, so that they need to click each other, so that the patient is more comfortable with the therapist, able to open up his or her heart and be receptive to ideas and suggestions. Because in counseling, you are opening up your dirtiest, darkest secrets.
Being your most vulnerable.
You're opening up your most vulnerable. It's very difficult for you. But if you find any form of communication problems or personality issues that you have interacted or judgment issues, people tend to close down immediately. The question then becomes is, are psychiatrists required to have the same thing? Ideally, yes. Because if I'm telling you something to do, or if I'm suggesting you to do certain things, unless you have trust, respect, and faith in me, why would you do it? And that's one in psychiatry, particularly when the role of medications is very little, maybe 30%, 40%. Everything else depends on how much you follow the psychiatrist's guidelines. That includes going to counseling, making lifestyle changes, including exercising, making difficult decisions in terms of relationship, finances, that indirectly or directly connected to your mental health. And psychiatrists may have to find that out, recommend you, and ask you to take some very difficult maladaptive things that are already going on in your life. And nobody would be willing to do that unless I totally trust in my psychiatrist. And it's a psychiatrist's job to get that kind of trust, that kind of faith from the patient. So yes, rapport, interaction with the patient, and that is why psychiatrists are usually are have a much higher standards of ethical behavior, standards of professional functioning than I would suggest with most of my other colleagues, because this is what we do. And it's double whammy. It's extremely damaging for patients when the psychiatrists have any other form of behavior rather than the utmost professional and conciliatory and facilitatory role.
And most of your work is in the medication management, but you do some of the counseling and the direction and
right.
so on.
I mean, even though most psychiatrists do medication management, explaining the problems with the drug medication, for example, telling the patient what to expect as side effects, expecting the progress of the illness, that involves some form of talking and interaction. It's not just giving medications, though in real life psychiatry, commercial psychiatry, the emphasis is on just medication, because you're given 10, 15, 20 minutes of the time. Beyond that, most insurance company would not reimburse for you. So in a private practice, if you don't see patients, they don't get to eat. So they have to make for the time, and that usually is becoming now more and more restricted towards just prescribing and dispensing medication. I do tend to have a luxury because I work in an academic situation. I do get the luxury, which I wish my colleagues would get that too, to be able to spend more time with my patients, because it's a learning institution, because it's showing residents and medical students how to interact with patients. So I do get more liberty to interact and talk to the patient than most of my colleagues in private practice are able to afford it.
Well, a lot of people start with a psychiatrist. Some start with a psychologist and then come to a psychiatrist when medicine is needed. But some of them start with you. And we're going to have to take a break, but I want to give you something to think about. So when a person, say in Sanderson or Seminole or Cerro Blanca or Hobbs, New Mexico, or somewhere pretty far off, think they need to talk to a psychiatrist, do they call the number that's rolling across the screen and say, how do I get set up with telemedicine, rather than for me to drive? I'm 70 years old and I don't want to drive to...
Yeah. Well, this is, do we have to stop?
No, go ahead until
okay.
he gives me one more signal.
Okay, all right. So that's a very important question, and this is something we are just starting to implement. It's not close to what we would like to. Eventually, we would like to place satellite computer centers spread around West Texas.
So that they could just go
David
to
can go to the nearest place.
Well, now we're going to have to take a break. We'll come back and finish this line of questioning in just a minute.
Okay, sorry.
Stay tuned. West Texas View will be right back.